Welcome to George Mason University's Studio A. My name is Rick Davis, and today our guest is scriptwriter, actor, director, and musician Lyn Vaus. Among Lyn Vaus's films are The Darien Gap, Next Stop Wonderland, Temptation, and the documentary biography Siegfried and Roy. Please welcome Lyn Vaus. Thanks for being here today.
Glad to be here.
Great to have you. As that introduction suggested, you've had a very diverse career, done a lot of different jobs in the film industry and also some music. How did you get started in the screenwriting business? All of it, really.
Well, it was quite a while ago. There was an ad in the newspaper. I was a student at UC Santa Cruz, and Al Pacino's production company had placed an ad, scripts wanted. I was naive enough to think that he was talking to me. And so I wrote a script, and that was the first script that I ever wrote. I thought if they were advertising in the paper, that obviously there was a shortage of scripts.
Yeah, really.
And that pretty much kicked me off on the writing part.
What happened to that script?
That script actually was optioned. At that time, the options were only lasted about 3 months. And I can't remember how much money it was, but it seemed like a fortune to me at the time. I thought that my career was going to rocket into the stratosphere at that point. They didn't pick up the option. So after the 3 months, it expired, and I moved out of my swell apartment in Westwood and ended up living in my car.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's a typical riches to rags story, right? But I do think you're the only person that I'll probably ever talk to who answered an ad in the paper, wrote a script, and got paid for it. Right.
Eventually, yeah. I wasn't paid initially, no, yeah. But we did manage to sell it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And then, of course, you've also acted in films and done some directing as well. How did those things evolve?
Well, in terms of acting, I've only ever acted when people have asked me to act. It's never something that I've pursued at all. So I've been fortunate that people have asked me occasionally to act, and although I enjoy it, I enjoy the activity. What I don't enjoy quite so much is the lifestyle that goes around it, the insecurity, the constant hustle, and I admire people that are psychologically strong enough to do that, to carve out a career for themselves as actors. But I prefer the anonymity and the seclusion of writing.
But you've actually crossed over that border of anonymity in your own work, right? You've actually acted in your own screenplays.
I have. I mean, for instance, in Temptation, which is a film that we'll look at in a little bit, I played the lead role, but that's because Philip Hoffman was busy, and the ball was rolling. We had to get somebody in that role, so I sort of jumped in there. But given my druthers, I'd rather not.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing though to be Philip Hoffman's second. Are you in line behind him for any other projects?
I know Philip a little bit. I mean, he was in. I actually directed him second unit on Next Stop Wonderland. So
fabulous.
Yeah, he's a really great actor, and it would have been nice if he'd have been in the picture.
I think you did great.
Thank you.
What about your musical life and career?
Well, music is always something that I love because you can pick up a guitar and you're making music. Film, you have to do so many different things in order to catalyze all the elements and get the ball rolling and have it made. And it can seem very glacial. It can seem like it takes a really long time, and sometimes it does take a really long time. But music is very immediate, and you can do it, and you're making music, and so it's almost been therapeutic for me while I'm waiting for the producers to get their act together and get the movie made. I can always pick up the guitar and I can play, and I've just always loved music. So.
Well, one of your recent projects actually is a CD that was released just a few months ago.
Yeah,
with a video associated with it.
Yeah, I did the video with the director of Next Stop Wonderland, and the genesis of the record was interesting because I just went in to cut some demos, and the place I went in to cut the demos the guy happened to have a record label and happened to like what I was doing and put it out on his record label. So the record I liked how it turned out. It was a lot of fun to do, and doing the video was a great chance to work with Brad again, the guy I did Next Stop Wonderland with, and So what I would say about the video really, and what makes it, I think, a little bit different than most videos, is it has a little story to it, and I don't think videos do that much anymore. So it was fun to even to make a tiny little narrative.
Yeah.
You know?
It was kind of like a blast from the '60s almost.
Right. It was very much
It
was very much because a lot of psychedelic music is sort of coming back a little bit. There's like bands are starting to do it now again, and so I thought it'd be interesting to go back and look at the '60s from the perspective both good and bad. You know, so.
And that piece kind of unites your filmmaking and your music making in a.
Well, I think music and film are very. I think they're very interesting in that they have a lot to do with each other. And film itself is very interesting because it incorporates all the different art forms within it, certainly music as well. And actually the way you put together a song and the way you put together a script, there's similarities that I've always been fascinated by. Without getting too highfalutin, Aristotle has this concept called the unity of space and time. Mm-hmm. And in music, that's extremely important because the note that you're playing, it has a duration and it has to interact with all the other notes, and in order to create a harmony that's the harmony that you want. And that's very much the same when you're writing a script. Every element of the script has a duration that has to be in harmony with the other durations. Yeah. And that's this very elusive part of writing screenplays that is very little understood, I think, because it's hard to really talk about, but you can feel it when you're writing a script, and that's the unity of time and space. Mm-hmm. That's where you get your pacing, which is important, because pacing is so incredibly important because that's when we feel bored. Even in good films, you're going to feel bored at a certain point. You know, you go, why am I bored? You know, it's because the pacing isn't quite right. It may pick up again, and you may all of a sudden be re-engaged in the film, and you may come out of the film saying, it was a good film. Mm-hmm. But there's a reason. And there are some films that are almost perfect. Most recently, I'd say The First Bourne Identity. It was perfectly put together.
Beautifully paced.
Beautifully paced, you know. And whoever wrote that script, I wish I should know his name. But so again, spacing, rhythm. Yeah.
When you sit down to write a screenplay, do you have any particular rituals or procedures or inspirations that get you to the keyboard?
Well, my main ritual is just a sort of overcoming of pain.
Yeah.
Because I think it's really important to sit down and write whether you want to or not, and that can be painful because you have to confront the fact that you might not feel as if you have anything to say. And the other thing is that my other ritual is that I always start, no matter what. Mm-hmm. I get up and I do it. And I would say to anyone who wants to write, you have to do it.
Yeah.
And in film, it's very everyone else in film can talk about films. But the writer actually has to do it. You know, everyone else can live inside this bubble of the film world, but the writer actually has to sit down and write. And you really have to do it. And now the only other ritual that I have is that I always stop before I write something that I know that I'm going to have to rewrite. Mm-hmm. So I could sit down there, and to be quite honest with you, I could sit down there and work for 12 hours at a clip, or I could sit down there and stop after an hour. Yeah. I never know. Mm-hmm. I never know. And those days when I stop after an hour, I don't. You know, it's hard for me to like face my wife. You know, she said, "What'd you do today, honey?"
Right.
You know.
But there's a discipline to that, really.
But there is, and sometimes I'm doing 12, sometimes I'm doing 1. You know, but you do on those days feel like your day was wasted. Yeah. The rest of the day, I'm usually like staring at the ceiling, laying, you know, like petting the cat or trying to figure out why did I stop there, and what is the problem? You know?
Well, John Steinbeck used to say he got up in the morning, wrote 10 pages, and stopped. If there were 10 good pages, 10 bad pages.
Everybody has a different, you know, and that's the thing about writing is like I'm sitting here telling you, you know, my little quirks or my little rituals or whatever. What have you, but everybody has a different process. Mm-hmm. I like to make a really tight structural outline. Some people find their inspiration on the page as they go. Mm-hmm. That would drive me mad. I'd lose the forest for the trees. So everybody has it. There's no right or wrong way.
Well, we have an example of your work to look at, Temptation. We mentioned it a little bit ago. Can you set up the clip for us, and then we'll talk about it afterwards?
Okay. Temptation was a very low budget feature that we did out in L.A. and the clip that you're going to see is Elizabeth Moss, who's most recently in Mad Men. I think she's gotten quite a bit.
Very recognizable face.
Notice for that. She's coming in and she's seeing her mother, Nora, who she hasn't seen in 20 years. They are estranged is putting it lightly. I think that's really pretty much all you need to know.
Okay.
Other than, I think that's.
And who's that actor?
Annette O'Toole.
Yeah, Annette O'Toole, and then
she's Superman's mom in
she's terrific.
Yeah. And she actually was in the original Superman movie as well.
Okay, very good. Okay. Temptation. Let's watch.
Forgive me, wind. I forgive you. Join me in the healing circle.
Nora, cut it out. I'm here, aren't I? I'm not Wind anymore. I am Morgan.
Thank you, great spirit, for this opportunity to heal my past and my relationship with my daughter, Wind.
Can I smoke in here? Look, Nora, Dad and I got over it, so why don't we all just move on? Amanda works for Exxon. She's a lobbyist. Amanda, this is Nora, my erstwhile mother, and that's Phil, her second husband, who she cheated on my father with. How's it hanging, Phil?
Are you hungry, dear? Phil has cooked some delicious...
We actually have to leave tomorrow night for D.C. I'm litigating a Fed case.
Not bad for someone who just passed the bar a year ago.
How about you brief me on the offers you've received to date, and then we'll review the libel risk.
Because of my standing in the industry, I have received lots of offers. I'm not sure how many, but I'm very conflicted, Wind, about the whole thing. Let's see. The highest offer I received was for, let me think, $500,000.
We'll get a third more at least. Let's set some basic terms. In order to receive maximum leverage, I'm going to need to have full authority to negotiate on your behalf, and I want 15%.
15%? I thought that lawyers only got 5%?
Stay out of this, Phil. This is my daughter. Now, is Amanda going to be involved?
Amanda's my partner.
You're also a lawyer.
My life partner.
I love your daughter.
But this is wonderful. I, myself, experimented with bisexuality back in San Francisco. I remember one film I directed.
This isn't a porno experiment, Mother. This is my life. Amanda and I certainly don't think it's wonderful that we can't adopt a child or receive workplace benefits.
Well, dear, maybe if you weren't a Republican.
I knew it. I flew all the way here, and in 5 minutes, you were already criticizing me. Let's go.
It's a great little clip because it has a whole little story right within it. So that's a nifty piece of writing. What led you to that particular story, or the story of the film?
Well, one day I was sitting around trying to imagine the most absurd form of Don Quixote is my favorite book.
Right.
I'm very much taken by people that are attacking windmills in their mind, and I thought, would be the most absurd situation for a person to say, I want to reform this, I want to reform something. And I thought, what if a woman was truly a feminist and she wanted to reform the pornographic industry, and she wanted to make films that were friendly to women, and she wanted to reform the business itself. And there was just something so absurd about that it just seemed like it was full of a lot of comic possibilities. So the character of Nora was born, who essentially is at war with pornography from within now. She insists that she can make pornographic films and of course the films she makes are terrible. No one likes them. Feminists don't like them.
Right.
People that watch pornography don't like them, so nobody likes them. So she loses everything, and she ends up sort of like Norma Desmond living in her own mind, living with her, her husband, who's basically just like a rent boy, basically.
Yeah. It's a great premise.
Played by me, yeah.
And very well. Another neat thing just about that little clip real quickly is the camera work. That's sort of that those fast, they're not really cuts, they're really just pans.
Well, yeah, we were very much inspired by the Dogma 95 film movement. At the time, that was like a really big deal, where you could take a PD 150 and you could go out and you could make a movie and you could do jump cuts, and you didn't really care about the lighting and all that sort of thing. So that was very liberating, and we shot 7 pages a day on that movie. It was really made lightning fast. We made the entire movie in 18 days.
Wow!
So everybody just kind of jumped in and did it.
It has a real energy to it.
Yeah, and I think that like anybody starting out today can do that, and that's like when I first started out, like in the 80s, you couldn't do that. Now you can make a horror film for $5,000. I wouldn't if I were starting out today. I wouldn't write a script and try and sell it. I'd write a script and I'd make it.
Yeah. Well,
right
speaking
now.
of starting out, let's turn to our students and see if they have any questions. Who would like to be first? Yeah.
Hi. Whenever you finish a project, when you complete a project, do you usually take a break before you start your next project, or do you jump right into it?
Well, it really sort of depends. If someone is asking me to do something, if someone's asking me to do it, I do it because I'm paid to do it, and that's what I do. I mean, money is a part of why I make the decisions I make. You'll find that there are very few people in film who can afford to completely disregard financial considerations and say, I'll take this project, but I won't take that project, for example. Fortunately, I'm fortunate because the projects which are presented to me are generally ones that don't contravene what I would do anyway. So that's not a problem. But on the other hand, would I like to take some time off? Yeah, I'm drained usually, because you're expected to have a finished screenplay in 2 to 3 months, and that really does mean there's quite a lot of pressure on you to do that. So I would prefer to take some time off.
Good. Another question. Yeah.
I was wondering what you think are the most common mistakes among young screenwriters.
I think the most common mistakes are believing that you're done when you finish your script, because rewriting is something that I think is extremely important, and we always feel when we get that first flush of like, oh, I've finished it, it's perfect. It's not. And put it aside for a little while if necessary, and go back to it. You'll find that there's more to be done. I think that's really the first thing. Just keep working on it.
Good advice. Another question.
Yes.
Yeah.
Are there specific aspects which draw you to some of these film projects?
Well, yeah, because I mean, I basically after Next Stop Wonderland, which was did well. I mean, it sold at Sundance for $7 million, which at the time was the most money that had ever been paid for an independent film.
That was 98, was that right?
98, yeah. I had a lot of opportunities, and I found that those opportunities were basically to do another romantic comedy. That's all anybody wanted, because, well, the last one had sold for $7 million, so obviously this guy writes romantic comedies, that's what he's going to do. You know, I wasn't interested in that so much. I ended up doing a lot of other different things, proposing to do a lot of other different things, and I've always pretty much just done what it is that I wanted to do, because I don't think if you try and write something that isn't you, it's going to fail.
You wrote you've written feature films, obviously different genres, and this other work we've talked about, but one thing we haven't talked about except in the open is Siegfried and Roy, which is actually an IMAX 3D biographical documentary, a whole different cup of tea. How did you get involved with that?
Well, that was probably the strangest project I ever had to do. how that came about. A friend asked me, if I'd be interested in doing it, and I told him flat out. I said, that's really not the sort of thing that I would ever think to do. He said, they're not who you think they are. And I said, well, I'll certainly meet with them. So I went and met with them, and I found that that the whole caricature. I don't know if the audience even remembers Siegfried and Roy. Because they haven't really been performing for a few years now, but they used to be the most famous magicians in the world, and they had a huge audience.
Long-running Vegas.
Yeah, and
TV as well.
Right. So, but they were definitely the butt of jokes, and were not taken seriously. And I just thought it would be cheesy. And I said to him, well, you know what? If it's a camembert, if you'll let me do a camembert, or instead of just like cheese whiz, there's going to be cheese here. I didn't know, But then I went and met with them, and their history is really fascinating because they spent a lot of time in Europe, and they did very sophisticated type shows, and they're a lot different than you might imagine them to be. They're public personas. And I said, well, I wanted to do the project if I could show that, and if I could also talk about the fact that both of their parents were Nazis. They said, okay, great, So I was allowed to do all those things that I wanted to do, except, of course, mention the fact that their parents were Nazis.
Right.
So in the final film, I had to. Every time I came close to saying that they were, I couldn't even say Nazi Germany. So I said that they lived in post World War II Germany.
That's beautiful.
And when the film came out, the critic in the New York Times said, that saying they lived in post World War II Germany he made me akin to like a Nazi apologist.
Wow.
Or that I was anti-Semitic or something. And
euphemistic at least, right?
Yeah. But I was very pleased that Owen Gleiberman in Entertainment Weekly said in a fairly positive review said an eerie myth emerges. So I was able to suggest all the dark forces behind without ever actually saying Nazi Germany.
Well, this is a perfect lead-in actually to the clip that we have, which is distinctly eerie in some ways, and kind of shows that old Germany aspect.
I was very inspired by Leni Riefenstahl's movies, actually, oddly enough.
So this clip is not going to look like your average documentary footage. Let's watch a clip from Siegfried and Roy.
Animals have an emotional language that we can connect with when we are absolutely in the moment with them. This magic connection saved my life and became my life.
Like Roy, Siegfried's journey forced him to face his greatest fears.
I decided to show my father my first magic trick. Magic had broken the spell. For a moment, I saw within my father the wonder of the child.
How did you do that?
Magic would become my life, and in my heart, I felt its awesome power.
So, as you were saying, this is sort of the myth-making aspect of this. That's the young Siegfried doing his first magic trick.
Yes, yes.
How did you come up with that concept?
Well, I did a number of interviews with them, and all these stories were part of their biography. Again, except for the fact that their parents were Nazis.
Right.
But those are all elements of their biography.
Mm-hmm.
But
and you spent some time with them, right?
Yeah, I did. I spent a lot of time with them. I the financing of the movie was curious. I don't know how much I should say about it. Let's just say that some of the producers were a bit soprano-ish. I remember sitting at a table with a number of them, and they were all called away on phone calls or something. There was one guy and myself, and we were sitting across from each other. And the film opens with a poem by William Blake, Anthony Hopkins, and tones, "A tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night." And this gentleman had a question about that poem. He said, "This poem at the beginning. What's this poem?" I said, "Well, it's a poem that every school child in America knows." He leaned over to me and he said, "How come I don't know it?" I imagine myself planted out there in the desert.
Right.
That would be the end of me. Fortunately, everybody came back to the table at that point. I never did respond to him at all. I was just completely
That's a
silent.
great scene. I hope you can use that in a film sometime. That's terrific.
Siegfried and Roy, when they saw the film, they broke down in tears at their own story, and they were very moved by it. So the ultimate audience, I suppose, was satisfied by it.
In a minute or less, tell me what you're working on now.
Well, there's an old superstition that you don't talk too particularly about what you've been working, what you're going to be working on. But I can say this, that the project I'm working on is a project that has been very close to me for a long time, and the director and I have wanted to get this project off the ground for a number of years. Mm-hmm. We're very close now, but we've been close before, and for one reason or another, it hasn't happened. But it's definitely a follow-up to Next Stop Wonderland. It's sort of a companion piece, and it's a musical actually.
Great.
So we've got our fingers crossed, and we are in the process of casting now.
We'll be waiting for it. Well, Lyn Vaus, it's been a pleasure having you on Studio A today. Thanks for being here.
It's been a pleasure being here.
Really terrific.
Thank you, Rick.
This is Studio A. Thanks for watching.